Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone.
Hello, everyone. This is Debra, and you are listening or watching Human Potential at Work. Today, I do not know my guest, but I actually saw a video that he did, his TEDx talk, and I was very impressed with the passion and the leadership that he's showing, in India, to make sure that people with disabilities are fully included there as well. So he also is hoping to get on the world stage at the United Nations in the future. So we're going to wish him luck, and anybody that is watching from the United Nations, this might be a very good potential for you to have another good speaker there. So my guest today is Ketan Kapoor B, and I'm going to let him tell us a little bit about his his journey, who he is, and we'll begin the conversation. So welcome, Ketan.
Thank you, Debra. Thanks for having me. And so as we speak today, I'd like to give my small introduction. I'm a serial entrepreneur, met pan-India level 2 recruitment companies, part of 2 IT companies, a part of ESOPs. I'm mentor to many companies on the board of directors. And I've been taking care of a lot of open communities of HR, startups. But my most exciting journey has been last 3 years, which I'm cherishing this journey. And this transition happened when I was thinking of giving, back to the community and society in my limitation means, because I myself fall into the inclusion category, that is 100% disability as per the Indian standards. And when I was thinking those lines, as a human, when you think in those lines of giving back to the society and community, there's a typical saying, the charity starts from home. And I started thinking on the lines where I could add more value, make people more understand the need and sensitize in the concept of universal design, which is worldwide acclaimed and acknowledged. But when I was doing that process, I understood that there were some things which might not work at this part of the continent, in my country, India, because we're still underdeveloping country. And when I say something like that, we have to accept this. And then I made a concept of design for disabled. It's a basic name I kept it so people can understand in my part of the continent. And in that process, I came up with something called a design for disabled. The design for disabled concept is basically a pre-British era and British era and after independence, which is already existing in our ecosystem from past more than 100 years. And we can revive it and try to take the best out of it and make it accessible for every human being. Because I believe that when you say something called a disability, I categorize in 3 ways. Normally people categorize in disability and a cross disability. I categorize 3 ways. It's called temporary disability, which can happen to any human being. It could be for 1 hour, 1 minute, 10 years, or maybe more than that, if anybody goes through an accident or a post-surgery. Then there's something called a disability comes, or a limitations comes, which can be come to a disability point with the old age. So I believe there's 3 types of disabilities are there in this world. One is a permanent disability, temporary disability, and advanced age disabilities.
Yes, I know that most people acquire disabilities as they live their lives. Of the billions of really of people with disabilities, 20%, it's less than 20% are born with a disability, like my daughter. So I know that you are a serial entrepreneur, as you mentioned, and that you have placed over 5,000 people in jobs, which I think is very exciting. You're a mentor, as you mentioned, to other entrepreneurs. You are a speaker at Accessibility India. There's quite a bit of interesting conversations happening in India with accessibility and disability inclusion. You did the TEDx, which I saw, Design for Disability. And then, of course, you were into all inclusion hiring as well. So you're really taking who you are as an entrepreneur, as an individual, as a businessman, and really rolling it into a lot of different entrepreneurial activities. Why did you, why does being an entrepreneur really speak to you, Ketan?
Well, being an entrepreneur, you understand, the basic DNA of an entrepreneur is self-sustainable, keeping an ROI behind everything. And at the most part, that you have to be upscaling in life. Otherwise, you're stagnant. And these three principles and a basic DNA, if anybody has, he or she, or anybody for any ways, can be a good, successful entrepreneur. But the consistency, the adaptability, which we now call agility, has to be there in every human. And from a stone age till date, human race has shown a lot of upscaling in our designs, in our thought process, acceptance. And today, when we call a global village, I think we should behave like a global village, except as an inclusion society, as an inclusive mindset, which is going to take the human race to a different level. And I think we are right on the other side of the door. It's just we are waiting the door to open and be one as an entity, as a human race, and have a belief that it's all not about us or we or I. It's all about the race which we have come, our ancestors and our future generation, what the transition we are sitting on and what we can leave it for. Even in the entrepreneurs, like the same way. What we are having, what we got it, what we are having, and what we can pass it on.
I agree. And let's talk a little bit more about disabilities and accessibilities in India. So I just this morning woke up and one of my former guests from India had sent me an article that he had written about a court case that happened in your Supreme Court, where people with disabilities over a certain amount, percentage of their disability, they cannot hold political office. And he feels that's not constitutional, and I have to agree with him, because why in the world would a person, now, once again, in the United States, we don't do it this way. We don't define a person with having a disability and give a percentage, but you do that in India. And so I think it's interesting that over a certain percentage, the Supreme Court of India would decide that those persons with disabilities couldn't serve their country, which I absolutely think that's ridiculous, because often a person with a disability has had to overcome a lot more things, especially in developing countries. So I'm not going to ask you necessarily to speak to that article because you might not have read it, but tell us more about what is happening in India for the rights of persons with disabilities. Are you really being included? And I know some of these answers because I've had guests on before, but I know there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of work to do all over the world. But tell us more about what's happening in India and how you're involved with it.
So I'd like to answer you this way. When you said the developing countries, so you have answered it everything actually for me. Our country is going from a transition from an underdeveloping country to a developing country. Now, you have to understand, accept few things with a pinch of salt. Where the few infrastructure, constitutional things are not correctly placed, yes, but we are improving every day. We are going through a transition where we are understanding the things around us from a normal person towards especially able people. There are few infrastructure things which are not correctly available for normal people. We are going through a transition for a better tomorrow, for a better nation. But everything said that, in our country, about that article, I'll answer you also this way, though I have not read it. But yes, I have heard about it. I'll answer it this way. It's very simple ways. In India, the percentage of disability certification is made in terms of, because the amount of government is giving the medical concessions, traveling concessions, so that people don't misuse it. Some people are even using because there's some kind of disability which cannot be seen. So the government general physicians gives you a certificate. So it should not be used in a wrong way or by everybody who are misquoting it. Point one. Point two, in our country, in India, even if I look in the larger picture, even at a APAC or a JAPAC level, the basic fundamental is acceptance level. When we talk about a general diversity or inclusion, or all diversity or all inclusion, the standpoint is very simple. Is how should we behave? If a person passes by you, and if you have to give him a second glance or third glance, because you don't know how to behave with it. It's like the first time the parents become parents. They don't know how to hold a child. But they learn. That urge to learn is only can come when you're neutral first. When you're neutral, you can put an acceptance block on that person. But if you don't have a neutral people or a neutral mentality or a neutral thing, then acceptance cannot be bridged on it. So whenever I tell anybody or answer the similar way which you asked me in our country, that we have to learn to be neutral first. Then the acceptance can be cultivated on it. And I think it goes for every country in a way.
Well, I agree. And I know that the United Nations, created the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and most countries have signed, most countries have ratified it. Unfortunately, the United States is not one of them. And I'm looking forward to us in the future showing leadership and ratifying the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. But I know that India is really working on adopting this and making sure that people with disabilities really do have the same rights as other people. And I know there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of advocates fighting and a lot of leaders fighting to make these things happen. But most of the people that I talk to feel that it's happening too slowly. And of course, we always feel that way. But what are do you have any hope for the future? Are you seeing any promising signs in India about being more included?
Yes, definitely. Because I tell you, and I'll like to answer the first part also, which I missed it. One of the previous finance ministers, or I think railway ministers, the train, was a person who was from a polio. So I checked with the person who said who cannot join a political lobby or serve the country. I think you have to recheck it. We had physically challenged people who were there as a very mainstream politician. And in a part of hope, yes, I like to answer it this way very simply. Because we are going from a transition from, like I said right now, I'm repeating my words, from a underdeveloping country to developing country, from smart cities to smart city projects. There's a huge room right now to embed these changes. And it's very convenient. We are not still hardwired. There's a lot of acceptance is there. The major part of the people who are educated and people who are in the mainstream, or even who are very skilled people who are working on a day-to-day basis or doing business. But the problem in the acceptance or complete acceptance is, again, like I said, is first you have to neutralize and create an acceptance. It's a demand and supply. Like when I talk about inclusion hiring, I always tell the top notches, the CEOs, CTOs, or the CHROs, or the CPO, that at the end of the day, don't think it's a process of recruitment. The main work starts after hiring, the process. Recruitment is, in this case, it's not inclusion, it's not like a process. You're done, is done. You hired a person, is done. No. After that, the challenge starts. In the same way, when we make any ecosystem for specially able people, our government makes it, the problem is maintaining those ecosystems. How much ROI is spent behind it? I will not hesitate to answer this way. Debra, even you agree with me. There's even the best of the countries, even in US, is a majority and minority game. What I seem to say in this way, the people who are using the majority of the masses, who needs it, and a minority, demand and supply, the ratio is very less. But if you look at the total population of the world, temporary disability, old age, and permanent disability, and if you make a ratio out of it, actually we humans will understand the more majorities of disabled people.
I know that according to the World Health Organization, 1 in 7 people have a disabilities. Now, according to the CDC in the United States, they just did a report last year that said 1 in 4 Americans identify as having a disability. I know in Canada it's 1 in 5, in the UK 1 in 5. So since many countries don't do census, we know that some of the numbers we actually have to guess at still. There's a lot of global problems with inclusion of people with disabilities in a lot of different ways. So let's talk a little bit more about the all-inclusion hiring. So I know that I have helped a lot of corporations put together programs that include people with disabilities in the workforce. Tell us more about what's happening in India and the work that you're doing, and how are you finding. I actually had a guest on last season that talked about some hiring that they were doing in India. They were a huge corporation, and they were providing transportation. They were really, it was pretty amazing. They were being very successful. They also were doing it in China. But from your perspective, how do you think the corporations, or maybe I'll use the word employers so that I'm not limiting it just to corporations, but how, are you making any progress with including people with disabilities, really truly including them? And as you said, it's not just hiring somebody with a disability, because that's great, but it's also, once a person with a disability is working for you, you need to make sure they're being accommodated. You need to make sure that they can be retained if there's any problem. And I'll give you an example. There was a gentleman that had a disability. I believe he was blind, and he was working in the United States, and the corporation really liked him, but when they changed their software interface, it was no longer accessible to the assistive technology he used. And so they didn't want to let him go, but at the same time, he wasn't able to be productive. So they came to me and they were saying, what do we do? And I had sent them to Ask Jan, which is a great organization that I've also featured on the show. But they're like, well, we don't want, we just want you to talk us through this, because this is not a hostile situation at all with this employee. We just really want this employee to be successful. So I'm just curious, what kind of things are you doing with your efforts with all inclusion hiring? Are you working with the employers? Are you helping them accommodate the individuals with disabilities? Are you, helping them retain individuals that might acquire disabilities? Because you mentioned old age. I as one of those people that I guess I'm old these days, but of course, disabilities, more of us acquire disabilities as we get older, but the reality is people can acquire a disability at any time in their life. So there are different segments, but at any time, and I'm not saying that as a threat, you better do it. It's just part of being a human being and living our lives. Sometimes things happen. So, but tell us more about the all-inclusion hiring that you're doing.
Okay, so I'd like to express this way. When we talk about gender diversity, in India, it's always hits a headline when any ladies enter the C-suite. It's still a challenge. In the top notches, it's still a challenge. So let's take it from there. And then I take it to the inclusion for specially able people. And I'll answer you this way. I don't know the company which you are talking, but I tell you very honestly, the best I have seen it till late. They're okay to create a job for a gray collar or blue collar. Nobody wants to create a job in the space of white collar for in India for inclusion hiring. That means lateral hiring or leadership hiring. Even best of organization. They want, but they don't know how to go about it. Right. Then they're skeptical if they are listed companies, a New York Stock Exchange or an Indian Stock Exchange or a Hong Kong Stock Exchange, because the human rights can really take them for a ride if they go wrong. And that's true in a way. That's their job, right? But at the end of the day, the challenge is, like I said, it's not just hiring them and that's the process ends. So when I go, and I like to use your platform to express how and what I do is different in a way, is I come as an inclusion consultant, identify tech and non-tech jobs. And I not only sensitize the HR machinery, I sensitize the hiring managers first. Because they are the people who would be assessing those candidates, validating whether they are right for the organization or not. Then we do a friendly audit of the building. Is the ecosystem ready? And sometimes if we have to compromise on a percentage, we'll compromise on percentage of disability. And there's something called in India is called EEO, that is Equal Employment Opportunity Act by PWD and SCPWD. That is Skill Council People with Disability, and PWD People with Disability. The Government of India also acknowledges. EEO, that is Equal Employment Opportunity Act, is applicable in India in every small to bigger giants. But the unfortunate part, and I know it, I will not say that they don't know everything about it, but they know very, very less knowledge about the Equal Employment Opportunity Acts of India. Now, then I sensitize the HRs, the hiring managers, and even the friendly audit of the building. I design the onboarding process different from a conventional recruitment, because that had to be more fluid. That will help to generate acceptance level in the people inside already, the onboarding process. Second, then at the same time, I make it sure that the ROI behind everything is kept such a way that the companies, when they're investing into it something, it should be profit-centric for them, so the many companies embrace it. The more the companies will embrace it, the more culture will be acceptance. At the same time, we create a buddy program with the normal people volunteer, and we design their KPIs or KRA such a way that they complement with the existing employee or the normal employee. And they had been places worldwide, even in India, that not very great percentage, but 3% attrition rate had been held by hiring specially able people. Because by nature, they are more contempt, they are more loyal, and that culture, they also they vibe with other employees.
Yes, and I would like to respond to that. You know, I have been an employer of individuals with disabilities for years, and had a very high retention rate. And I sometimes wonder if it is because I'm a great employer, or the reality is that often people with disabilities don't have as many opportunities. And so, you know, I think, yes, I agree that people with disabilities are, you know, can be very loyal to the employer. They, you know, are very productive. We don't see a lot of the myths that we assumed about people with disabilities in the past. We know they're not true anymore. I do want to say that the company I was mentioning is Flex Technologies, which is a multinational corporation, and they have hired over 2,000 people with disabilities in India and another 2,000 people with disabilities in China. So they're a huge organization. I think they have like 150,000 employees all over the world. I also know that there has recently been created an Indian chapter of the United Nations International Labor Organization's Global Business Disability Network in India. So there are things happening, and I think there's a lot to do, but there's progress being made and innovation being made as well. And so it's a big country, just as a reminder, there are over 1 billion people that live in India. There's 341 million that live in the United States, just for example. So they're a much, much bigger country than, you know, somebody like the United States, population-wise. And so if you just think of the sheer number of people that need to be employed, you can, you know, sometimes say, well, you know, there's so many other people. I've had people say that to me. It's like, yeah, we really need to hire a diverse workforce, because diversity really leads to innovation and productivity. So it's just very interesting, the challenges that India faces, making sure that people with disabilities are fully included, which is why I thought that your work was really important. And also your entrepreneurial work, because I find that a lot of people with disabilities become entrepreneurs because the workforce doesn't always embrace them or include them or really understand the value that they bring to the table. I'm hoping with some of the recent things we're seeing, like Caroline Casey's efforts with the Valuable 500 being on the world stage at the World Economic Forum, and we're talking about disability inclusion in a broad global way, that this is going to really, help people that are on the ground like you, trying to make a difference locally and nationally in India. Are you finding that the employers are receptive to the consulting and the strategies that you're providing to them?
Employee in terms of the inclusion or the normal employees?
That when you say the normal, you lost me a little bit. I'm talking about employers. Hopefully, they're looking at, all employers are looking at including people with disabilities in their workforce. Are you saying that there's only certain groups that? I didn't understand the point that you just made. Maybe you could elaborate on the point. I'm sorry.
You said the word receptive, right?
Yes.
So when I use the word receptive, I'm saying in terms of the inclusion people or people who are normally working. I'm asking them.
Well, I think you could answer that question either way. Certainly, the co-workers of the workforce, are they accepting their co-workers with disabilities? But also, that would be an interesting thing to answer. But also, I was asking it from: are you finding that employers are wanting to employ people with disabilities more?
I will answer you this way, Debra. See, I'll just give you a small 1 minute understanding on this. I was speaking to one of the CEOs of a very big giant of a country. And there was an occasion when I was making understand why you should hire especially able people, inclusive hiring. You should adopt. It's a high time. So he was a nice friend also. And he told me, Ketan, is fine, but these things are good to have. And mark my words, he said, it's not must to have.
Wow. Okay, that says a lot right there. Just saying that it's a nice to have, it's not essential. So that's
on a business point of view. So I answered him this way. I said, sir, I will not comment on it, but I like to answer you this way. That 2 decades back in our country, in nearly 90s or mid 80s, general diversity was good to have, not must to have. Now it's a mandate to have. And the way we are proceeding in the faster pace in today's life, I think 7 years down the line, you will call me one day, you say this is must to have, not good to have.
Yeah, we're lucky to have you there fighting the good fight. So, Ketan, tell people how they can find out more about your work.
I'm trying to tell you the receptive part. No, so in the receptive part, which I'm trying to answer you,
all right.
It has to percolate from the up.
Right. I agree.
The ideologies, the culture has to give it by the consent of the top notches. The younger generation or the millennial generation or the leaders will understand, and they understand it, but they need that backup of the top people, the top company, top notches, because it's a gravity, It's a gravity in our country. The world is a gravity. So all has to couple it from up to down. It doesn't go down to up. It's a basic fundamental of life.
Well, I don't know. I see grassroots movements, going from the top up, so the bottom up. So I think things are changing in the world. It has always been. It has always been leaders down, but I'm starting to see in different places in the world, that the people coming from the grassroots efforts are actually having more success than they had in the past. So I know I'm naive. I know that still, just like at the World Economic Forum, it was very powerful to have Sir Richard Branson saying disability inclusion matters, to have Paul Bowman, saying disability inclusion matters. It does, but I do think it probably has to happen from grassroots, and it's got to happen throughout societies. So we're starting to see a shift, but I'm not naive. I understand there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do, which is one reason why I have the show. I like to I like to talk about what's happening in different parts of the world and where we're making progress, which we're making progress everywhere. And also to show that there's still so much work to do. Did you want to comment on that?
Yes, we need to go through the process of like you said, shifting and a lot of work to be done. But I just like to say this way, you're right. You said, I don't deny it. At a grassroots level, there had been things which have been transformed, a lot of things. But the time it took, the tenure it took was very high. Mm-hmm. Even if you take from Gandhi to Nelson Mandela, the leaders, it took a transition. It took years and decades. At this junction in our life, things are going very fast. Yes. What I'm trying to say is that it's not like now or never, but at the end of the day, it's a much needed thing. Mm-hmm. And at this point, the way the technology, the information, the infrastructure, the way we are trying to make, even from a typical traveling like Hyperloop, things has to go a little bit on a faster pace. It's a high time.
I agree.
The whole transition slide we now at least have some boosters behind it. And, I'll just answer you this way, there was a person who asked me, what is your introduction on the podium? I was speaking. So I told him very nicely that my introduction is that I'm not only disabled. Okay. I'm able to give a hand holding. But for that, there has to be a hand holding towards this kind of communities. Even the best, when we took from general diversity, from the time even in American history, when the boomers came out, they had to be a hand holding of their own communities. And there were some people who held them out and got them in the mainstream. What I'm trying to say is very simple. At this point, we need the hand-holding of a lot of corporates, political lobbies, social reformers, people like you who are bringing it to a lot of people's attention, people like me who are speaking about it, trying to do in terms of generating jobs, trying to change the mentality of the corporates or even the business mentality. Like you just now said, there are many especially able people who are not getting the jobs. That's why they're coming more in the business frame. It's true. But at the end of the day, not everybody will like to have a business mindset, will like to generate his own revenue. At the end of the day, when you said about flex, I don't know about the flex. I was going to ask you, but I didn't interrupt you. That jobs which they have created, how much of them are from white collars?
They created 2,000 jobs, and a lot of them a lot of these are manufacturing jobs because they're a manufacturer. They're a huge manufacturing company, but they also have some people in supervisor and manager positions as well. But the jobs that most of their employees have are manufacturing. So I understand the point you're making, but this particular company, Flex Technologies, that's just the demographic of the way all of their jobs are made up. So it's sort of I am against whenever a corporation takes and gives all of their lowest level jobs to people with disabilities. I think that's a fail. I mean, any job's a good job, but come on, that's still a fail. So really, when a corporation comes to me and says, what jobs should we set aside for the people that are disabled? I'm like, no. Let's restart this conversation because if a person with a disability comes and applies for your job and they're qualified for multiple jobs, but not those ones that you set aside, you need to be considering them for any jobs that they're qualified for. That's the right way to do it. So it's, there's a lot of moving parts to this, but I want to make sure, and I will let you comment. I'm going to let you comment on that. But I also, when you're finished commenting, will you please let the audience know how they can find out about you on social media, your websites, and just make sure that people know how to connect with you. And I'll also put those links by your program as well. But go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay, so they can connect you. You can help me to connect them, point one. And second thing, they can connect me on LinkedIn. I'm more proactive on LinkedIn. I just started my Facebook because I was supposed to come for this thing. So I started yesterday. So
welcome to Facebook.
I'm not a Facebook person. But now I have come on Facebook, and so they can connect me on LinkedIn. That is Ketan Kapoor B, and career at top. That's my LinkedIn ID. The same on Twitter. I'm more active on Twitter and LinkedIn, and same thing on the Facebook now. And like I said, they can always connect you. I know you will help me to connect them. And I'll answer you this way. See, like you said just a few minutes ago, India's biggest strength is we are a neutral speaking country. Our population is our biggest growth. And a lot of giants are coming because of the demand which we create because of our population.
Right.
Now, being a neutral speaking country, that means academically we are forcing more. So imagine any country's GDP grows from underdeveloping country to developing country because the people are more skilled and educated. Now, when that culture comes, it means you'll acquire a good job, you study. Point one. When you have a specially able person in the home like that, they emphasize more that you study, you will earn a better living. But at the end of the day, the company looks for a blue and a gray collar jobs, where you will be surprised there will be school people. We have the infrastructures for last 10 years, but they could not come to the top levels.
Right.
That's a hard-hitting fact. Many companies tells me when I go, what kind of data you have? They ask me a very typical question. It's a very serious thing. If you look in the right way, they ask me, Ketan, we will do this recruitment. What data you have? And Debra, I tell you very honestly, 18 years experience of mine to recruitment. I know one thing in recruitment. First, the demand is created, then supply is judged. Not first supply is seen and then demand is asked. So when your process is wrong, to look into it, why can't you treat it like a conventional recruitment?
Right. It's the only way to do it.
That's the right way of doing it. So somebody asks you, and trust me, 80% of the companies ask me, what data you have? So I end up saying on a very lighter note that I have a data of Prime Minister. Will you hire? You cannot generate a job looking at the data, right? You tell me your demand and let me be the supplier.
Right, right.
What we call headhunting in recruitment. Then why to treat it in a different manner? It's a mindset. That's what I'm trying to say. You have to neutralize everything, then bridge it acceptance level on it.
I agree.
That is the key to everything. Even today, when we are talking about countries, jobs, ecosystem, anything, you could write for ladies or especially able people or old age people. Now, I tell you the all inclusion which I do, actually when you use a word, in my inclusion is not only specially able people. Huh? I talk about prodigy like Tanmay Bakshi, which IBM Watson takes a lot of pride. There are a lot of prodigies in these schools in India which people don't know. They are veterans in the industry which can be rehired as a subject matter expert. So when you have an organization with a young millennium and a veterans and an inclusion, you're talking about actual inclusive society.
Right, right. And societies work better when we're all included.
So age, sex, community, and especially able people, then only we can talk about inclusive word. not only targeted with specially able people.
Right. And every country looks at diversity in different ways. I know, it's the same ways, and there's some differences as well. So that's why I speak a lot about the sustainable development goals of the UN, because of the 17 sustainable development goals, 11 of them include people with disabilities. So it's very important that we continue breaking down these barriers and making sure that people know about resources like you, that you're available in India to help these corporations that want to include people with disabilities in the workforce. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. I wanted to make sure that I could turn the volume up a little bit so that people knew about your work, and we will continue to, highlight what you're doing, and, we'll put the links out so people can find you as well. But thank you so much for being on the program today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having, and I've already wished before the program starts to you and your team, the wonderful work you guys are doing.
Thank you so
much. And I wish more and more success. Thanks for being our voice, extended voice, and I hope the work which you're doing is echoed in the future, in many years to come, and it reaches the right ears, and some element of change happens with the whole process which you're doing. And I think that's the best thing we can give to the future generation.
Ooh, well said, well said. Thank you so much. All right, we will talk to everyone later, and we'll make sure that you know how to get hold of Ketan too. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a nice week ahead.